Good afternoon or good morning, wherever you are, everyone. Welcome to the 6th webinar in our advocacy webinar series, Lifting Up Advocate Voices, How to Build and Support Family Advocate Networks. My name is Lauren Robertson, and I'm the Digital Advocacy Manager here at Childcare Aware of America. You've probably heard my voice before if you've been on any of our other webinars. We're so excited that you're here today, and we're really excited to dive into this topic. It'll be Chrissy, our Director of Advocacy, and I speaking a little bit, and then we also have a guest on today who will be speaking a lot and has greater knowledge and greater expertise than we do, and we're so glad that we can bring that to you all today. So before we get started, we just want to reiterate our goal for this webinar series: to expand the advocacy capacity for CCR&Rs, providers, and family advocates at the state level. I think this webinar is really cool because we are going to really dive into how CCR&Rs can organize advocates and providers to be voices for change, and then also how to support those advocates and providers in being, in staying organized and staying involved and being those voices for change. Everyone is muted on this call, so if you have any questions, type them into the chat box. We are recording this webinar and will be posted soon after the webinar is completed. And if you have anything to add it to the question of chat box, and we will also have poll questions, just a few to find out who's on the call and what all of your thoughts are. And as always, if you haven't already, to join the Childcare Works movement, please go to childcareworks.org. All right, so today we are going to be talking about building those advocate networks, how to find those advocates, how to train them and build up their skills, and then how to use their stories for change. And then we have an awesome guest on from Parent Voices in California, Jennifer, who's going to talk about how they make their advocate network work as well. And then we have a little bit of a treat for you at the end. We are going to ask you all to take action right at the end, which is a really fun thing to be able to do all together. So wait for that little surprise. So again, I'm Lauren Robertson, the Digital Advocacy Manager here. We have Chrissy West who will be talking shortly as well, who's our Director of Advocacy, and then Jennifer Greppy from Parent Voices is going to be speaking on a little bit later. We're so excited to have her on again, so I can't wait to hear her. And I think I'm going to learn more from her just as much as you all are, so it's very exciting. So as we get started, I just want to hear who is on the call today. So I'm going to launch our first poll. We just want to know what best describes your role. Are you a child care provider administrator? Do you work for a CCR&R? Are you a parent, a nonprofit staff member? If you are an other, feel free to type that into the question box just so we know who you are. All right, get a couple more seconds. I'm going to share this once it's done so we can all see who's on the call today. All right. I'm going to close that poll and share that with you all. So as you can see, we have about 60% CCR&R staff members, some parents, some nonprofit staff members, and some other folks. Great, I hope you all benefit from this, and I think no matter your role, today's content will be really helpful. And then this is just for us to get a feeling about how you are feeling about building, sustaining, being part of those advocate networks. Do you feel confident, ready to go, unsure, or totally in the dark? All right, looks like we have a few folks who are totally in the dark. About 50% who are unsure, and about a third who are confident, ready to go. So we hope the folks who are confident, ready to go learn something new today. We hope those unsure folks can become confident, ready to go at the end. And then those folks that are totally in the dark, we hope that we at least get you to unsure and get some things planted in your brain to get started. All righty. So I'm also really focusing on talking slow on this webinar because I know I'm a fast talker. So if you ever hear breaks from me, it's not because I've stopped talking, it's because I am taking a break to make sure that I'm going slow. So we know that storytelling and people's experiences inform change, inform policy changes, help policymakers make decisions, help CCR&Rs make decisions as well. So we're discussing today how to find and curate those advocate voices to influence change. And so we wanted to just briefly touch on why parent advocacy is so important and how to identify those voices. And I'm really excited because Jennifer from Parent Voices will go deeply into how they recruit and build those networks with those parents and make them feel like they're in a community and make them feel like they are able to make change and operate autonomously, and that's really awesome. So I just wanted to emphasize that the importance of parent advocacy is to paint a picture of why laws need to be changed or strengthened. And we know that data and studies are really impactful and important, but the most important thing is matching those studies, that data, those numbers with real people's stories. Policymakers want to hear from parents, they want to hear from families, they want to hear from providers, because those are the people who day in and day out feel the impact of the policy decisions that they make every day. So we know that parents are key to changing policy, but trained parents are policy leaders. And combined with the leadership of CCR&Rs and the experiences of providers, we can influence change together through these networks. So Child Care Aware of America does a couple of really cool opportunities to bring folks together, but it's on the using those CCR&Rs and those other connections to bring those family advocates. So for example, every year we bring in our parents to, or every other year I should say, into our yearly symposium. And we don't just want CCR&R staff and providers in the room, we also want those parent voices, and we know that those voices are sometimes overlapping and stuff, so we're excited that we're able to take that opportunity, and I think that this webinar will touch a lot more on how to really make sure that you're incorporating those voices at every step of the way. So when we think about how to identify advocate voices in regards to childcare, I think it's important to think about these 3 questions. If you're on our storytelling webinar, you have seen these questions before, and I have used these questions to help frame when I'm thinking about a policy or thinking about a change that needs to happen, of who has a story to tell, what are their stories about, and who should hear those stories. So it's thinking about who is the advocate, what is the content of their story, and who is the audience of those stories. And I think a lot of times we do talk about policymakers being the audience, but sometimes that's the general public or CCR&Rs or state administrators who are implementing those policies. So there's multiple audiences who can hear the stories, and it's not just limited to parents. It's caregivers of children, it's providers, it's anyone who is day-to-day living a life that is impacting young children. So we say parent a lot, and Jennifer from Parent Voices will talk about parents, but acknowledging that it's not always a parent, it can also be a grandparent or a aunt or uncle, or someone who, a provider who also has children, or a provider who doesn't have children but knows a lot, who has that day-to-day experience as a provider. What did you say? Chrissy just said something really funny, and that's such a good segue, because Chrissy is on the next slide to talk about building a sustainable advocate network.
Thanks, Lauren. I did say advocates can also be people who don't have children but have cats, like myself.
Yes. And myself.
Yeah, and Lauren. So I'm going to talk just about some different leadership models and ways to organize when you're bringing in, especially volunteers, parent advocates. You know, they have other things going on in their life, obviously. They have a family, they have children, they have jobs, they probably have volunteer opportunities, some are going to school. So this is not the only thing in their life. So a couple models of leadership, that typically don't work, and I think we've all experienced these. So the first one on the left, so that's you. You're that dot in the middle, and you're the person that everyone that you're trying to organize to get to tweet or go to a meeting or write an op-ed or share their story, they're all coming to you. So you're the person that has all the information. You're the person that wants to get a message out there or share an action alert, and everyone's coming to you for anything. That is not sustainable, and I'm sure we have all felt like that dot at some point, where you're the go-to person, everyone's banging on your door, blowing up your inbox, your cell phone. That type of leadership does not work in the long run. If we want to make something sustainable and a network that is going to empower people and keep going forward into the future, that's not going to do it. The next one, the second one on this page on the right, is where there are lots of different leaders, but everyone's kind of doing their own thing. So you're in charge of Twitter, you're in charge of op-eds, you're in charge of recruiting volunteers, and everyone just kind of goes off and does their own thing, but no one's talking to each other. So your volunteers that maybe are writing op-eds aren't on the same message that your people who are on social media are. This type of leadership does not work either. Although it does empower more people, they're not talking to each other. Each just kind of goes out and does their own thing. So this is what we call the Snowflake Model. This was actually started by Marshall Gans at Harvard. He was a professor, and he helped organize for better working conditions for migrant farm workers in the 70s with Cesar Chavez. He's also worked with, Dr. Martin Luther King. He knows what he's talking about. So this is a leadership model that we call the Snowflake for shorthand. So this is where you are actually maybe just one of the dots of many in an interconnected web. So it kind of looks like a pretty little snowflake, which is lovely. But everyone has a job to do, and they're talking to each other. So you might have an organizer in the center. That could be a parent leader. That could be your organization. That could be a partner. You can put this at any level you would like. And you're talking to 4 other leaders. So maybe that top bigger dot is the person doing all your social media. The one to the right of you is doing all of your print and journalist outreach. The one on the bottom is talking to parent advocates. Maybe the one on the left is talking to legislators. You're all talking to each other. Everyone's on the same message. You all have the same goal. And then each of those kind of snowflakes off of you has their own snowflake. So the person that's talking to legislators has a whole team of people, maybe that can do rapid response and show up for hearings. Maybe one of those dots is somebody that can go to their lawmaker's office every week and drop off a letter from another parent advocate. And so everyone is on the same message because it's all coming from the same dot in the middle and you guys are all talking, but you're kind of organizing yourself out of a job. So if I'm one of the larger dots off of the center dot, I'm going to recruit volunteers to help me do all of the things that my team is tasked with, and eventually I'm going to organize myself out of a job. Hopefully the people who I've recruited are then going to recruit teams of people or a couple more volunteers, and they're going to organize themselves out of a job. So that the snowflake keeps getting larger and larger. We're all interconnected. We all talk to each other. We all share messaging. We all share successes. But no one person is responsible for everything, and you have a network of people to rely on. So we call this the Snowflake Model. I'm going to show you an example of that. And like I said, this is just an example, and it's a pretty big snowflake. So you'll see I have SPLs a lot. We call those state parent leaders. But this is an example of a snowflake. This can be interchangeable if you want to make it a state level team, if you want to make it a local team. These things are all changeable. You can make your snowflake as big as you would like. But basically, a statewide snowflake could look like this. So maybe you have a CCR&R or a parent leader as the hub of your snowflake. The CCR&R maybe sets the agenda for the types of issues that they want to push forward on. For instance, if CCAOA was in this center, we would probably push for CCDBG funding in 2020. That's kind of our big ask. So if I am that middle hub representing CCAOA, I'm going to have maybe a staff person or a volunteer that runs an events planning team. I talk to them about our goals, our communications, our messaging, and they know what events they would like to plan to get forward to that goal. I'm going to have a social media leader. That person might have a bunch of volunteers that maybe one does Twitter, one does Facebook, one does Instagram. God forbid one does Snapchat. I don't know. We're getting crazy. Perhaps I have a parent leader that does the parent recruiting team. This is someone that I've worked with for a long time. I really trust her. She has a great rapport with other parents. And so she's going to recruit other parents to join her in the recruiting team. And then perhaps I have a staff person or a family advocate that does policymaker outreach, and they coordinate volunteers to go visit their local legislators or drop off letters from constituents in their district. For each of these teams, they're going to recruit state parent leaders or perhaps other volunteers that are going to jump in when needed. And maybe even those state parent leaders then recruit other volunteers to support them. So that if one person drops off this snowflake, the parent recruiting team is not going to fall to pieces because they still have 4 other people working on this. And hopefully those 4 people have additional people to support them, so that everyone supports each other and there's no gaps, there's no falling through the cracks, everyone's on the same messaging. This is a really sustainable leadership model. Obviously, if it, Marshall Gant started it in the 70s and it's still here and working and modern movements are using it, then this works really well. For instance, in 2008, then Senator Obama's organizing team implemented this model, and they actually used this throughout his tenure as president, organizing for issues on the ground while the administration was doing their work. Moms Demand Action uses this now. There are actually a couple of grassroots groups that still use this organizing model and use it to great effect. They have huge networks of volunteers, so that the saying, many hands make light work, that's kind of what this is. So everyone's organizing themselves out of a job by creating new people to support, new volunteers, and those people are picking up little pieces of work so that everyone can do what they can when they have time. And so that's the Snowflake model.
Yeah, and I think another thing about this model is you might be doing this informally and not have this image in your head, and now this image is putting a structure to what you're doing and maybe an ability to formalize it. I was even thinking about some of the volunteer I do outside of work, and I was like, wow, we really do the Snowflake model, but we've never formally said that. And so I think that having us thinking about a structure for the chaos that is building networks and building groups of volunteer advocates can feel overwhelming, but this structure is very helpful.
That is a great point. Thank you.
Thank you, Chrissy. So we think about why family advocacy is so important, and we think about how to build those networks, what that structure looks like, how to make sure that people have roles, people have meaning and purpose. And then it's also important to think about how we have our family advocates tell stories and how to really frame their stories for change. We have a whole webinar on storytelling that Liz, our social media manager, and I did a couple weeks back, and that really talks a lot about, how to train people on telling their stories. But we just wanted to briefly touch on ways that CCR&Rs can support parent and family advocates in telling their stories. We have a couple examples in there that are going to be in this webinar in the slides once we post them that are just really good examples of how different families are using their stories to implement change. And both of these families are embedded in their own family advocate networks, formally and informally in their Facebook groups, and formally connected with their CCR&Rs and their other local groups as well. So I've shown this slide a couple times in these webinars, but I think this is a really good framework for thinking about when we are building those family advocate networks and training those family advocates to have them really think about what their background is, what their story is, what they've gone through, what they can share to impact change, and then connecting that to a specific challenge. So whether that's a policy challenge, an administrative challenge, something that maybe doesn't have a solution yet but has a challenge, and then thinking about tangible next steps. A lot of times people think you have to have the action item has to be like pass this policy or increase this funding. And while it is great to have those actions, sometimes it's just like educate the public about this issue, or educate my policymakers, or just talk to my policymakers so that they keep this in mind in the next legislative session. So action steps can feel really big and really overwhelming, but again, today we're going to have a quick take action at the end of this webinar, and while it's not connected to a specific policy change, it is connected to sharing a story and sharing a research that is really impactful for families and providers. So I've shared this before, and I think that this slide is a really great way to tie in CCR&Rs. Yes, they can organize, they can bring people together, but also CCR&Rs have a lot of logistical capacity that separate family advocates don't have for themselves. So CCR&Rs, they're the coordinators, they are the meeting planners, they're creating resources, planning site visits, and planning those meetings with elected officials. And that's why CCR&Rs are so key to the success of networks, especially at the beginning of creating them. So you're the backbone of these family advocate networks, because you can provide things such as one-pagers. You can do the formatting. You can help family advocates share their story, write their story, and then connect it to specific statistics and connect it to specific asks. A lot of times family advocates will come with their story, they will come with something they want changed, but they're not necessarily equipped with the specific stats and ask, and you're there to help connect the dots for them. These examples, these one-pager is a great example of things that Child Care of America uses at their Family Advocate Summit. So we help train all these families. And while this is not like fancy and special, this is, each family advocate gets one of these and they can bring them with them on their visits. They can refer to it when they are talking, refer to it when they are asking someone for something. It can be in meetings, it can be general, it can even be if they are going to talk to other family advocates and talking about what their story is. So a good one-pager will always share the advocate's story. You know, that's at front and center, that's putting the face to a person, to a real story. Includes some state-specific information to persuade the policymaker, and then have that specific call to action. So again, this is a really specific call to action. They were calling for increased money to CCDBG, which we got, which is great. A lot to do with family advocates coming to the Hill in DC and really asking their Congress members to increase funding for CCDBG. But it doesn't always have to be specific. It could be more general or even down to a local ask up until a federal ask.
And it could just be education for those of you who aren't allowed to technically lobby. That could even just go toward educating your lawmakers on the issues.
Right. So then we wanted to just share that if you as a CCR&R feel overwhelmed, or you as a family advocate feel overwhelmed with the idea of finding statistics about childcare or how to even connect your story to facts, Child Care Aware of America has a research team. We have a robust research team. We have like multiple types of research teams at sitting across from us. So we have the resources and we have done a lot of the legwork for you through our state fact sheets and then our cost of care report, and which we just released this week. So we have state-specific facts about each one, and in some states we even have county-specific numbers. So if you are talking at the county level, we might have that information for you, and if we don't have it on our website, you can contact us and we might be able to finagle something for you. And so I just like to remind people that as a national membership organization, we are here to serve people at the local level and on the ground. We often feel detached when we are sitting in Arlington, Virginia, and hearing about childcare issues across the country, but this research is meant for you. It's meant for you to use. It's great for other researchers and policy analysts to look at this research and be like, cool, what does this mean? But it's even better for advocates and CCR&Rs to utilize this research for change. So this is another key part of building that impact of the Family Advocate Network. And this kind of touches on those models, that Snowflake model that Chrissy was showing. But once you build those family advocate networks, it is a really great opportunity to create rapid responders. And it can seem really overwhelming that people are constantly getting hit with emails and action alerts and things on social media, but building a coalition of trained family advocates who are ready to respond when needed is a great opportunity for you to tap in to people when you need it. So during your state legislature, there might be a bill come up that all of a sudden it's going to be taken off the table and you need people right away to testify, to write letters to the editor, to email and call their state reps. This is a really good, the state rapid responder model is a really good model to have those people ready to go. I know Chrissy in the past, they've organized this through Facebook groups, through email groups, through text chains. It really depends on the size and the capacity of your rapid responders, but having people you can instantly go to and be like, we need someone to talk about childcare, non-traditional hours on Tuesday at 3 p.m. for 30 minutes. That is something, when you build and train your family advocate networks, that can easily come through this. And I think that parent chain, that family advocate chain is really reflected in the Snowflake model. People are connected, people know each other, and people know who to go to when they have these issues arise. So now I'm going to pass it over to Jennifer from Parent Voices. She is going to speak about about her work with Parent Voices, talking about their model and talking about the amazing work they do. I'm going to pass it over to her. Jennifer, when you want me to go to the next slide, just say next slide and I'll click right over for you.
Great, thank you so much. And good morning, everyone. Or I guess it's good afternoon if you're on the East Coast. My name is Jennifer Greppy, and I am the lead chapter organizer for Parent Voices California. We are a grassroots organization. Sorry, next slide. Thank you. So we are a parent-led and parent-run grassroots organization fighting to make quality childcare accessible and affordable to all families. And when I say that we're parent-led and parent-run, that's a real thing here in California. We have gone above and beyond to make sure that parents really have a voice at the policymaking table and that they're able to use their expertise as parent leaders using early childhood systems to really provide our policymakers, our community, and our advocates with real life experience about how childcare is either working or not working in their life. Next slide. So how does Parent Voices work? Parent Voices has a steering committee of parents. They're made up of elected parents from each of our 15 chapters across the state of California. So because Parent Voices it runs in California, we have a very large state, which means that we need to have a lot of chapters across our state to really represent all of the different communities that California creates. So we have very rural areas with a lot of immigrant families living in the Central Valley. We have sort of our Bay Area, San Francisco Bay Area chapters that really represent our more urban areas. And in Southern California, we have a mix of both rural and urban chapters. We are a statewide organized group that really works out of the CCR&Rs. And so we have this really unique model where we are able to, sort of utilize the resource of having the CCR&R, but also have the autonomy of Parent Voices being its own entity and project of the network of CCR&Rs in California, so that we're really seen as two separate organizations. While we get support and coordination and staff from our local resource and referral organizations, we also have this autonomy where really it's the parents who are making decisions about how, where, and what we will be fighting for. That happens in our local chapters that are housed at the local resource and referral agencies, and they really decide, what our main issues and actions will be. Next slide. Thank you. So how do we recruit parents? Really, we recruit parents. There's no real shortcut to recruiting. Shortcuts are not the way that we work with parents in the real world. We really have to build relationships. We have to talk with one another, learn about each other's stories, find out what issues and challenges parents are facing, and from there really look at different opportunities and ways that parents can get involved. Now, it is really a great thing that we have an entryway through the CCR&Rs to be able to create and build those relationships. So when a parent calls the referral line and says, I need help to pay for childcare, which is a very common thing that happens on a referral line. And when that referral counselor has to tell that parent, I'm sorry, but we have a waiting list for all of our subsidized childcare programs, that can be a really difficult conversation to have with the family, especially when they're in crisis, they're living in poverty, and they need childcare in order to work keep a roof over their head, and continue to move forward with their family. And so when the CCR&R staff member really doesn't have anything to offer that parent by way of an actual subsidy or voucher for childcare, it really is a great thing to be able to say, but we do have an advocacy organization that we can refer you to so that you can share your story and your struggle with the people who can actually fund more money into those childcare waiting lists. You know, the subsidy counselors, the referral counselors, they have a critical role to play to really make sure that families are directed to local advocacy opportunities so that they can build strong relationships and then use their expertise as a parent to be able to change the policies that are holding them back. And really, we do a lot of work just parent to parent, word of mouth about you know, parent voices is really a critical piece of how how we build our organization. And so when a parent says, hey, you know what, I called this organization, they didn't have a subsidy for me, but I was able to learn about how we can make this change, and I know you need childcare too, why don't you come to this meeting with me? And you know, that parent to parent recruitment is really a vital piece of the work that we do. Next slide. So Parent Voices has created a leadership development model, and it's really based on our core values. And our core values really are about learning by doing. We really believe that, you know, in order for parents to be able to share their expertise and their knowledge, they need to have opportunities to do that. And by learning from one another about, you know, when a parent is going to our state capitol here in Sacramento, and there's a big budget hearing to fund, you know, new slots for childcare subsidies, that can be a little bit intimidating for a parent. And so by going with a group of seasoned veterans who have done budget hearings before, who have testified in front of our legislature, and watching them do it, it really gives them the confidence that they need to be able to go and step up to that microphone for their 2 minutes to testify. Next slide, please. So we are creating social change by developing new parent leaders to advocate for childcare and other emerging issues. And we do that really by having some different opportunities throughout the year. One of those opportunities is called Knowledge is Power. And Knowledge is Power is a training that we do regionally here in California. We typically do 5 of them throughout the state. And it's an interactive workshop where we learn about federal and state budget policy and legislative processes. We have a skit that we do that parents learn about the budget process and how at each season of the year there are different opportunities and ways for parents to get involved and share their experiences. We also have a leadership academy, which is a 6-week training where parents really learn about effective storytelling, developing campaigns, how to, you know, conduct a power analysis, how to run a meeting, and really looking at all of that through a race, class, and gender lens, which is a really important piece of making sure that we're including everyone in this process. Next slide. We also are encouraging parents and other child care consumers to identify their issues and solutions and courses of action. And we do this by inviting parents to local chapter meetings. These happen monthly at the local CCR&R, where Parent Voices chapters are housed. And parents really build relationships and, you know, support one another and have the opportunity to sort of network and learn from one another about what resources are available in the community. And, you know, their children make friends with each other. They They really look forward to coming to the meetings. And when we look at the 5 protective factors and really those concrete supports in times of need, this really is an opportunity for parents to come together, to build those communities, and to be with one another, to talk about solutions to some of the challenges and struggles that their families are facing. We also have Parent Voices events and actions, which are always 100% planned by parents. We do evening conference calls for 6 weeks prior to some of our bigger events, where parents plan every detail from, what our theme will be, what our platform issues will be, to what actions parents can take when they're at the event. Very often, some of the big advocacy organizations, legislators, and others here in California will say, how do you come up with the policies that you guys decide to fight for? And really, what we do is not exactly novel, but it's really important, which is we listen to parents. We bring them together, provide opportunities for them to, use their stories and their experiences to share with us where the pitfalls are, where the potholes are in our system, and how we can really then take those struggles and those challenges that they're facing and create policies to fix it. And, we will have everybody sit around a table. We'll put a piece of chart paper in the middle of the table, and we will ask them a series of a few open-ended questions. And it's really remarkable what they come up with. It really is. They have amazing ideas about how the system will work better. Why? Because they're living the system every day. Next slide, please. So, parent leaders organize our annual Stand for Children Day, which is an opportunity for all of our chapters to come together at our state capitol in Sacramento. They call us the Sea of Blue on that day. We have blue t-shirts, and 700 parents from across California come to our state capitol to testify about what it is that their family has gone through. And I remember my very first day as a parent who got on a bus and drove to Sacramento 15 years ago because I was so scared that I was going to lose my child care subsidy that was so important to my ability to keep my family, self-sufficient. And when I watched those speakers on the steps of our state capitol speaking about their triumphs and their challenges, and how inspired I was by watching them speak, and how that day my life really changed because I was able to go in and tell my story to my local legislator. And that year in the budget, childcare was the only social service that wasn't cut. And I knew it was because we were there. I knew it was because Parent Voices was there. We were telling our stories, and no longer could our legislators look at childcare and say, oh, childcare, that's, the parent's responsibility. Instead, they had to hear my story. They had to look at me, and they had to say, Jennifer, we don't care about you and your children. And that's much harder to do. And so because, Stand for Children Day is completely planned and run by parents, it really is an authentic day filled with action and love for our children. And it's an opportunity for legislators to really hear what's happening on the ground with parents. And again, that's really 100% planned by parents. And, we also testify at budget hearings. We meet with our departments of education and our Department of Social Services on a regular basis. And, all of that happens because parents are taking the lead. Next slide. We also, are really aware of how important it is to make sure that the media really is hearing our message. And so parents plan press conferences, demonstrations with a twist throughout the year. For an example, the parents came up with the idea of doing, instead of the state fair, we did state unfair. And it was, a way for us to sort of use some fun twist on something that was happening in our state anyway, to really make people sit up and listen to what parents had to say. And that event actually got more media than any of our events, past or present. Next slide. So Parent Voices really believes in building strong, articulate parents who govern the policies of our organization. Parent Voices, each of our chapters has a Parent Voices steering committee representative, and that representative sits on a board of sorts, and they set the policies, they develop the campaigns, they approve activities, and each one of the chapters has representative and alternate for that committee. We then have, every year, we have a leadership convening. We stopped calling it a retreat because, that sort of brings about a certain vision in people's heads, and we're not getting massages and having our feet rubbed. We're really there to work and to develop our campaigns and strategies for the coming year. So we've actually renamed it the leadership convening. And parents at that convening really vote on the Parent Voices platform for the coming year. Next slide, please. And, our communications happen in a variety of different ways. We have our local chapter meetings that happen throughout the year. We have our organizer calls where each of our chapter organizers at each one of our 15 chapters joins a monthly conference call where we talk about what's happening in the budget, what legislative actions need to happen, what letters need to be written, what's happening locally in specific campaigns. And then we also have steering committee calls and meetings, both in person and over the phone, where all of the organizers and elected parent leaders are able to come together. And if you haven't already, please find us on Facebook and Twitter. It's a really great way to keep up to date about what Parent Voices is doing and how we, what our actions are and what's happening with our families and our parents. Next slide. So what doesn't work? So what we talked about is that what works is listening to parents and really valuing their expertise and understanding that there are no shortcuts, right? That the way to create a powerful parent movement across your state or your community is really to build relationships with parents, with other community members, and then to provide opportunities for those parents to engage in the policymaking world. And so controlling the agenda doesn't work. It doesn't work to say to parents, okay, we're going to fight for these 4 things. What do you think about that? Or here's a new policy that people are trying to pass here in California. What do you think about it? But instead, we want them to be involved at the front end of developing those policies from the beginning. So an example of that would be, here in California, we're looking at new ways to measure accountability in our TANF program. And they're developing a whole new system here in our state. And instead of just looking at work participation rates as the only example of success in the TANF program, instead they're looking at what are your sanction rates, how much money are people earning 1 year off of the program, how is our supportive services being used, like childcare, transportation, and education opportunities. And so because they were deciding to create this whole new system of how to measure success in our TANF program here in California, we really felt as parents that we needed to be a part of those processes from the beginning, instead of waiting until the end when they created the whole new system and then giving our input about what that product was in the end. And we really believe that that's the way to really make sure that the voice of parents and the experts at the table really have an opportunity to insert their vision of what a new system of TANF will look like here in California. And we're excited to say that that did happen, and our Department of Social Services has really taken the lead on making sure that parents have a voice at that table. And so making sure that we're not controlling the agenda and making sure that we're really listening to the needs of parents up front and not after the fact. We're also making sure, trying to do for parents instead of with parents is really important. The whole goal of organizing is to, make sure that parents have the opportunity to speak their truth, and not telling them what to say or what to do, but rather just giving them the opportunity and the tools to share their experience in the best way possible. Really creating a base of parents to only support your cause is also something that doesn't work. If you're real serious about doing advocacy with parents, it's very important to make sure that that base of parents really is fighting for what they see as the most important issues in your state and not the other way around. It's also important that you don't assume that you know what's best for parents without asking them. So just because you think a Saturday meeting will work because it's on the weekend and parents don't work, maybe the parents in your community always work on Saturdays because they're in non-traditional jobs that only work nights and weekends. And so making sure that just because you think something doesn't mean that that's the way that parents necessarily will feel about it. And so make sure that you're asking them how they feel or think about something before making those assumptions. Next slide. So I wanted to sort of just talk a little bit about some of the successes that Parent Voices has had. And, it's really important to celebrate successes because, in today's world, they seem to be few and far between. We have an administration who doesn't really value childcare and early learning. And so, here in California, we've had a governor who really does support our issues, but not as much as we would like. And so it's been really important for parents to really, make sure that they are not forgotten as we move through our, we're the 5th largest economy in the world here in California. And, you would think there would be plenty of money to fund everything that parents need. But the reality is the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And so unless parents are there, they're at the table, they're demanding the things that they need, they will fund something else. And so here in California, much like every state across the United States, we've really been struggling with the eligibility requirements for childcare. So parents were turning down raises, they were turning down bonuses. Yeah, you heard me right. I can't even imagine going to my HR person at my job and saying, that raise that you wanted to give me, can you take that back? That seems absolutely crazy, but it was the reality here in California. With the high cost of living, 70% of our state median income, parents were falling off of childcare services every single day because of the income eligibility guidelines being frozen for more than 10 years. And so parents were tired of that. They wanted something different. And we heard it time and time again at chapter meetings, at our regional trainings. They were like, this just isn't fair. And I should be able to, get that raise. I should be able to take a promotion if I want to, but if I take a 50-cent raise and I lose my childcare, then I lose $2,000 a month in childcare subsidy. It doesn't make sense. And so parents turn down those raises. Now, because those struggles were happening, and we saw it becoming more and more of an issue, we started this fight 4 years ago. And it took us several years to convince and educate and share our stories with legislators about why this issue was so important. And we were really excited in last year's budget that we were finally able to increase those income eligibility guidelines. And parents can now earn, a family of 3 in California can now earn $10,000 a year more and stay eligible for child care services, which is so critical to making sure that your family can make ends meet. The other thing that happened in that same budget year is that we were able to get 12 months of continuous child care for families. So another thing that was happening here in California is that parents on varying schedules, meaning they weren't working 9 to 5, Monday through Friday, every week, but rather, the non-traditional hours, nights and weekends, 3 or 4 part-time jobs, as well as going to school. Those families had to recertify for childcare once every 4 months. And if you can imagine for a moment doing your taxes 4 times a year, that'll give you a little bit of an insight of what these parents were facing. So they were having to collect, 3 months worth of pay stubs from all 4 of their jobs, have all of their employers sign those papers, have their school people, all their teachers and professors and counselors at school sign their papers. It was absolutely absurd. And they had to do this and get it turned in, or their child care was cut off, and then their children were losing out on the care that they so desperately needed. And so because of the fight of parents and, going to hearings and testifying about their experiences, we were able to also pass 12 months of continuous eligibility for families, meaning that they certify once a year, and unless their income goes over 85% of our state median income, they do not have to report for any other reason, which has really been an important step to making sure that children in California have continuity of care and that parents have an opportunity to move up and to take those raises and bonuses and to have the security of knowing that their child care will be in place for 12 continuous months. And so, next slide. And so, I just wanted to share this last slide, which is from one of our parents, Becky, who said, "Before I joined Parent Voices, I never knew my voice mattered. Today, I know better. I am empowered by my experiences with Parent Voices and use it to empower others. I have evolved into a passionate speaker that gives me permission to be true to myself and stand up for what I believe in and what I know is not fair. Parent Voices has changed the person I used to be into the person I always wanted to be, strong, confident, and fearless." And so, that I think is a perfect way to sort of wrap up this part of the agenda, to really talk about a parent's experience working with Parent Voices and how our structure has really enabled parents to be the expert at the policymaking table. This year in California, we have 3 of our members running for elected office, and so we're hopeful that they will win in the next 2 weeks. We're in our final push, and we're going to continue to fight until every child in California has access to quality, affordable care.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. I think the great thing about everything you said is I know from my experience at the state level that this model is so replicable because we know the things that are happening in California are also happening across the country, and we know that parent voices are often not heard. And I think your model is amazing. Hearing all those successes inspires me and makes me want to go support parent advocate networks in every state and get a parent voices in every state. So thank you for
yes,
sharing
we
that.
would love that. And just so you all do know, we are a part of a network of parent-led organizations from across the country, and with an organization called UPLAN, which is United Parent Leader Action Network. Also, you can find that on Facebook or at the website, and we can make sure that you get that that information. And it's a way to stay connected with other parent advocacy organizations in your local states and communities, and to really, you know, sort of look at a comprehensive approach to advocacy across our country.
Awesome. Thank you, Jennifer. All right, so we have a couple minutes left. I'm going to be very brief and then give you all something to do before you hop off this webinar. So we just wanted to review with you all that we have resources for you, and we are here to support you. And if you are inspired by Jennifer and you want to start organizing a family advocate network in your area, we are here to support you and help you, and use our data, share your story through our Family Voices blog, take action on our action centers. We are here to support your child care advocacy. And so now is the time for you to take action. So as you've probably seen, because we have been tweeting it, sharing it on social media, talking about it with everyone, we released our annual cost of care report this week. We changed the title this year to be the U.S. and the high cost of child care. It used to be parents and the high cost of child care. We wanted the title to reflect that not just parents feel the brunt of the high cost of child care. It is an issue for all of us, for the United States and all of us. So I'm about to send out in the chat box a link to a click to tweet. So you click it and you can tweet right away from your Twitter account if you have one, as well as our social share kit. We are having a Twitter storm at 3 o'clock, so in 1 minute, from 3 to 4 p.m., where we're going to have people tweeting about the report, sharing images, sharing their experiences, talking about how the cost of childcare has impacted you. I think, you know, thinking about Jennifer's point about keeping those subsidy reimbursements to a year, and making sure that people who see increases in their salaries are not penalized. I know I worked with a parent once who worked at a Family Dollar, and she was promoted to manager and had a 25-cent raise per hour, and that was going to kick her off of her child care subsidy completely. So I had to advise her not to take the promotion, which was like one of the hardest things to do, right? We want people to take promotions and to go higher in their careers, but also if that means that they can't afford their childcare, that would not be a solution. So we are here as a resource again, and we encourage you to tweet today about your experiences. We have one more webinar. You probably know, November 6th, less than 2 weeks away, we have a pretty big election coming up, and on a week after it, we are going to have a webinar talking about some reactions from the elections and some next steps. We're going to bring in our policy people as well, and think about opportunities for us to take everything we've learned in all these webinars and push them forward into the new year. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to reply to the email that we are going to send after this webinar, or to Chrissy or I directly. And if you're still on the line, we would love for you to complete our last 2 polls. So we just want to know how you feel right now about recruiting and building advocate networks. Has your experiences changed based on this? I know personally, hearing Jennifer's story has made me think about different ways and different engagement. Chrissy and I often talk about how it's so cool that they have autonomy, that the parents get to decide their issues. And I think as people who work as kind of pseudo-government agencies, that can feel like a really big deep dive, but parents are getting stuff done. All right. Awesome. I'm seeing a lot of folks saying they're confident, ready to go. No one is totally in the dark, and I consider that a success in my book. And one more poll. What else do you want to learn about? If you have anything else that's not on this list that you want to learn about, feel free to type it in. I think I had included that using research in my advocacy, because we've been talking to our research team a little bit more of how we can collaborate more. We sit 3 feet apart from each other, so how can we really translate our research into deeper advocacy and vice versa, having advocacy informed research. As a former researcher myself, I'm really excited about that topic, so I included that as kind of a next step for our next webinar series. We will be talking about how to set those advocacy priorities based on the elections, based on predictions for the new legislative sessions, and we are really excited to have our policy team on with us to talk about that as well. Not that Christy and I are policy people, but we are policy people with an advocacy lens, so giving that kind of more wonky perspective as well. All right, I'm going to close up. Well, thank you for sharing your perspectives, and thank you for being on today. We were just saying that this Wednesday feels like it's a Friday, as in it's been a week. So thank you for joining us and hearing Jennifer's story and her work, and we're really excited to work with you all and hear your stories, and we'll see you on November 14th.